Welcome to the Thinking Stack. I am Akei.
And I am Zen.
All right, let's try and wrap our heads around something today that, well, it sounds pretty straightforward, but quickly spirals out. We've got, what, roughly 7 billion people on Earth?
About that, yeah.
Yeah.
A staggering number. But the real kicker, the thing we're diving into, is this idea that it's not just 7 billion people. It's more like 7 billion unique realities, 7 billion individual worlds.
Right. And, this isn't just some abstract philosophical musing. We need to be clear on that.
Absolutely not. It's grounded in some pretty solid stuff, neurology, psychology, even the systems we build around ourselves.
So while we're all technically sharing the same planet, the way we actually experience reality, that's deeply personal, like a fingerprint, you said.
Exactly like a fingerprint, utterly unique to each of us.
Okay, so to unpack this massive idea, we're going to use our framework, the 7-layer integrated thinking stack, the
It's
ATX.
cognitive Swiss Army knife, yeah.
Yeah.
It helps us break down this complexity sort of layer by layer.
So quick refresher on the ITS domains. We start with perception, asking what's actually true versus what just feels right.
Then prediction, looking ahead, figuring out what's likely, but also how people really tick, not just how we think they should.
And finally, action, where the rubber meets the road. What breaks when we get things wrong, and what can we build that, well, actually lasts?
Precisely. So today's deep dive is all about digging into the why behind these 7 billion worlds. The brain science, the psychology, the systemic stuff, and we'll start right at the foundation. Perception.
Let's do it. Layer 1 of perception, cognitive cleanse. The core question feels simple, but is anything but what's actually true once you strip away all the assumptions, the hopes, the fears.
Yeah, because the really crucial thing to grasp here, and it can feel a bit weird at first, is that we don't just open our eyes to some objective external world. We wake up inside our own constructed reality, the one our brain is constantly building for us.
That phrase you use, trusted hallucination, that always sticks with me. It's like our brain's running a constant simulation.
That's a great way to put it. And this simulation, this internal world, it's built from such a personal mix of ingredients. Your specific memories, your fears, the language you think in.
Hormones, trauma.
Yeah. Even dreams, dopamine hits. It all feeds into this unique sensory experience that is your reality.
And this isn't just like a nice idea.
Yeah.
There's actual neuroscience behind this.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the predictive processing model. People like Carl Friston, Andy Clark, they talk about how the brain isn't just passively receiving information.
Right. It's predicting.
It's actively predicting. It's constantly generating hypotheses. Based on everything I know, what sensory input am I likely to get next?
Okay, so it's making educated guesses all the time.
Constantly. And then when the actual senses come in, it checks. Does this match my prediction? If not, that's a prediction error.
And it doesn't just ignore that error.
Nope. It updates its internal model. It learns, refines its predictions for next time. So what we call reality is essentially the brain's best continuously updated guess about what's out there, filling in the blanks based on probability from your life.
Wow. So what feels solid and real is just my brain's most plausible story right now, based on my entire life history.
Exactly. And Neil Seth put it beautifully. We're all hallucinating all the time. When we agree about our hallucinations, we call it reality. Just let that sink in. Your solid reality is your brain's best story.
Which explains so much, like why two people can see the same car crash or the same argument.
And have completely different stories about it.
Yeah, and neither one is necessarily lying.
Not at all. Their brains literally processed and rendered different versions of that event. Their unique internal models, their biases, their focus in that moment, it all shaped what they saw.
Okay, but this has some really serious implications for how we treat each other, doesn't it?
Immense. Think about what happens when someone's reality is invalidated. Things like gaslighting or systemic issues like racism or denying someone's trauma.
It's not just disagreeing with them then, it's like attacking their whole way of understanding the world.
Precisely. You're attacking their survival map, their ability to make sense of things, to feel safe. You're telling them the ground beneath their feet isn't real.
And that map, that internal world, is the only one they have. It's built over their whole life. Denying it must be incredibly damaging.
Deeply. Which takes us right into layer 2 of perception, moral intelligence. Because if we accept this idea that everyone's in their own perceptual universe, how on earth do we figure out what's right? Especially for everyone involved.
It kind of blows up the idea of a single universal moral code, doesn't it? If my truth isn't your truth, then my right might not be your right.
Exactly. Morality, viewed through this lens, maybe it can't be this rigid, fixed thing. It has to become more relational, focused on how our actions actually land in someone else's subjective world.
Which means what? Less certainty about our own righteousness, more humility.
Definitely more humility, and maybe a shift towards what you could call ethical pluralism, acknowledging that different moral viewpoints might actually be valid because they stem from fundamentally different lived experiences, different realities.
So less judgment, more curiosity.
Mm.
Trying to understand why someone sees it that way.
Yes. Curiosity becomes almost a moral act in itself. Instead of just declaring your position, you try to understand theirs.
This reminds me of John Rawls and his veil of ignorance.
Ah, yes. From A Theory of Justice. Such a powerful thought experiment.
Still so relevant.
Absolutely. Designing a fair society without knowing where you'll end up in it forces you to consider all the possibilities, all the potential realities people might face. You have to think about fairness from multiple angles.
And then there's Harari and Sapiens, talking about shared fictions.
Crucial point. Things like money, borders, laws, even gods. Powerful stories we collectively agree on. They allow us to cooperate on a massive scale.
But they become dangerous when we forget they are fictions, right? When we treat them like objective truths.
Exactly, when we mistake the map for the territory. So maybe the real moral work isn't just defending our own fictions,
but questioning them and trying to understand, maybe even respect, the fictions that structure someone else's world, even when they clash with ours.
That takes real humility. Acknowledging our view is just one version among billions.
Okay, so this leads us out of pure perception and into the prediction stack, where these individual realities start interacting with the world and with the systems we build.
Right. Layer 3, systemic foresight. Now the question becomes, what happens next? And maybe more importantly, who does it happen to?
This feels like where the idea of differing realities really hits hard practical consequences.
It is. Because so many of our systems, social, political, organizational, seem to be built on this unspoken assumption of a shared perception, a standard issue human experience.
Which just doesn't exist.
It doesn't. Think about the justice system again. Often based on a rational actor model, right? Assumes everyone weighs risk and reward the same way.
And we just established that perception is deeply personal. Someone facing constant insecurity or discrimination is going to perceive risk and rational choice completely differently than someone with privilege.
Absolutely. So a system designed for one version of rational inevitably fails others. It's a fundamental design flaw.
And Harari's shared fictions, when our shared understanding of things like justice or fairness starts to break down between groups.
The systems built on that assumed agreement become fragile. They start to fray. We see polarization, conflict.
Filter bubbles online, algorithmic bias reinforcing inequalities.
You could argue these are all symptoms, second-order effects of ignoring this basic truth of perceptual multiplicity. We're designing for an illusion.
Which forces us back inward to layer 4, embodied insight, asking, what am I wired for? Biologically, emotionally, and how does that wiring shape, maybe even distort my perception?
Crucial layer, because perception isn't just a head game, is it? It's physical, it's felt.
Letha Feldman Barrett's work feels essential here, on how emotions are constructed.
Yes, absolutely. Her research is groundbreaking. It shows emotions aren't these universal things that just happen to us. The brain constructs them.
How does that work again?
It's based on, well, a mix. Past experiences, yes, but also your current bodily state, which he calls interoception, how you're feeling physically in the context you're in. The brain interprets physical sensations and creates an emotion to make sense of it all.
So how I feel isn't an objective measure of what's happening, it's an interpretation. My brain's story about my physical state.
Precisely. And that physical state, stress, trauma, exhaustion, hormones, illness, acts like a really powerful filter on perception. It changes what you even notice, let alone how you interpret it.
Bessel van der Kolk's work on trauma, the body keeps the score.
A profound example. Trauma can literally rewire the nervous system. Someone might be in a constant state of high alert, scanning for threats, even when they're objectively safe. Their body's perception is different.
So you could have two people in the exact same room.
And one feels safe, relaxed, while the other feels profoundly threatened, based entirely on their internal embodied state. It's like they're in parallel universes in the same physical space.
Which brings us neatly to layer 5. Human-centered design. Okay, if perception is embodied, constructed, personal, How do real people actually behave? Not the idealized rational robots, but messy, emotional humans.
Right. This is where theory really crashes into practice, and why so many designs, policies, products just fail.
Because they assume logic bots.
Pretty much. They assume people make decisions based purely on logical assessment of information. But we're stories with skin, aren't we? Driven by narrative, emotion, biases, we take mental shortcuts.
Like the Sapir-Whorf ideal language shaping perception.
That's part of it. And Kahneman System 1, thinking that fast, intuitive gut reaction mode that drives so much of our behavior.
So many decisions aren't these careful calculations.
Far from it, which explains why a policy that looks perfectly logical on paper might completely bomb in reality. It wasn't designed for how people actually feel and operate. It was designed for that hypothetical, rational actor.
So, good design, human-centered design, has to start with empathy. Really trying to understand the lived, felt reality of diverse humans.
Absolutely. It means designing for the 7 billion ways of being, embracing that complexity, not trying to iron it out into some non-existent average.
Okay, final domain, action. Layer 6 is risk and resilience. Asking the tough questions. What if we're wrong? What if our reality map is inaccurate? And what happens when the world changes? Because it always, always does.
This forces us to admit reality isn't static. Risk isn't static. And any system built assuming a stable, shared world is just brittle. It's waiting to break.
There's that interesting research about neurodiverse teams.
Yes. Finding that teams with different ways of thinking, different perceptual defaults, are often better at spotting risks others miss. That diversity becomes a source of strength, of resilience.
It also connects to things like Bayesian thinking.
Right.
Continuously updating our beliefs.
Exactly. Like Judea Pearl's work suggests, truth isn't fixed. Our understanding has to evolve with new information, with different perspectives. We have to keep updating the map.
So resilience isn't about digging in your heels and sticking to one plan.
No, quite the opposite. It's about embracing pluralism, building systems and mindsets that can handle, even benefit from, different views and unexpected shifts. Designing for divergence is future-proofing.
Which brings us to the final layer, layer 7, the execution engine. Okay, we get it conceptually, but how do we actually do this? How do we translate insight into action, build things differently?
This is about making it concrete. Building systems, interfaces, organizations, cultures that are actively designed for difference, not just passively tolerating it. Prototyping for multiplicity, not sameness.
We mentioned inclusive design earlier, going beyond just physical access.
Right, thinking about sensory diversity, different emotional needs, cognitive variations. Like Gensler's work on designing for neurodiversity, how do we make spaces and tools genuinely work for a wider range of human realities?
And Nassim Taleb's anti-fragility concept seems key here too.
Very much so. Building things that don't just withstand stress, but get stronger from it.
And the stress here is the inherent diversity of human perception. Those 7 billion realities bumping up against each other.
Exactly. So if your system, your company culture, your policy, your software breaks under the stress of different perspectives,
then it wasn't built for reality in the first place. It was built for an illusion.
Oh, okay. So wrapping this deep dive up, what's the main takeaway?
I think, for me, it's that deep understanding that the world I see is uniquely mine, crafted by my brain, my history, my biology.
Yes. And the equally important flip side, every single other person is living in their own unique cosmos, just as real, just as valid to them, with their own filters, their own truth.
So the real work, the constant human work, is navigating that difference, respecting it, designing for it, trying to connect across those gaps without demanding sameness.
Because real understanding, real progress, it doesn't come from pretending we all see the same thing.
No, it comes from convergence, finding common ground, but only after acknowledging and respecting all of those different starting points, those 7 billion realities.
Some final thoughts, maybe, for people to chew on.
Okay. If you want more peace inside yourself or with others,
maybe start by getting genuinely curious about perception, yours and theirs.
If you want systems that actually work for people,
build them for the messy, diverse reality of human psychology, not some clean abstraction.
And if you want real connection, real community,
maybe question that assumption that sameness equals safety. Embrace the richness and the challenge of difference.
This has been The Thinking Stack,
where we believe complexity isn't the enemy.
Illusion is. Until next time, stay sharp,
stay humble,
and stay gloriously weird.